Hi everyone, it's Paige, and today I'm going to be doing a book review. I haven't done one of these in a really long time, so bear with me if this is kind of rambly and chaotic. This week I read My Lady Jane. This is the first book in the Lady Janey series. The second one is My Plain Jane, and these are by Cynthia Hand, Brody Ashton, and Jodi Meadows. So I'm going to talk about like kind of pros and cons as we go through this. I will say from the very start that I gave this a 2 out of 5 star review on Goodreads, so just kind of bear that in mind. So My Lady Jane centers around 3 characters, the first being King Edward, and he is Henry VIII's son. And there's Jane, which is Lady Jane Grey. She was queen after Edward, but only for 9 days. That is like actually historically accurate. I'll get into the historical accuracy thing in a minute. And then we have Gifford, also known as G, and he ends up being Jane's betrothed. So I didn't know a whole lot about this book going into it, which I heard was a good thing from some of the Goodreads reviews that I read before I jumped into it, because I guess you're supposed to go into it with a really open mind, which I did, and I agree that other people should do that as well. So I really wanted to like this book, mostly because I've heard so many good things about it, but again, I think it kind of fell under that weird thing I have where I hear a lot of hype about a book and then I read it and end up not liking it, and I'm extremely disappointed. And while I wasn't extremely disappointed by this one, I was just kind of like, eh. I found all 3 characters to be super interesting. I think I liked Edward the best as the story went on. Jane just felt like they were trying to make her too relatable to girls of today who like to read and, you know, they don't want to be like flouncing around in dresses. Like, it just felt kind of forced. And to go along with all of this, I think it's important to remember that they add a magical aspect into the story too, which was actually something that I really liked. I didn't think I would like it because I'm very much into like historical fiction books, and I thought like, oh, I want to have this book that kind of is just a fun take on history. I don't need magic, but I actually really liked it. So number 1, I did think there was funny dialogue and, like I said earlier, really interesting characters. I listened to the audiobook while I was reading this. I just thought that the narrator breathed a lot of life into the audiobook and the characters themselves. If I had been reading this, I don't think I would have enjoyed it as much, but the dialogue was just so fresh and funny and interesting, and that made me like the characters more than if they hadn't been funny. As far as the plot though, sometimes it felt way too slow. Like most of the book I was just like waiting for something to happen, and it just kind of felt like nothing ever really did. There were things that obviously like happened, but it just felt like they came too late, or other times it felt like things were super rushed, and then we would get into these periods of the book where nothing was happening and they were spending way too much time focusing on that or traveling or describing things, and it was like, I just don't care, let's get to the next action point. So I don't know if that pacing has something to do with there being 3 different authors maybe, or just the way that like the book was set up. I don't know. It felt like things were moving way too slowly, and if you saw like my Goodreads updates while I was reading this, I just kept saying like, okay, it's funny, but I'm still waiting for something. It's funny, but when is this gonna pick up speed? It's funny, but... So dialogue and funny characters aren't gonna save a book for me, at least. I want something to actually happen. I do like the general time period of the Tudors, so it wasn't like that was a problem for me either. Earlier this year, I've been to Hampton Court Palace twice because, as some of you know, as I've mentioned in my last like 2 videos, I'm living here in London right now. I love going to all the palaces and like looking through them and seeing all the history and everything, and Hampton was very centered around King Henry VIII and his kind of time period, so I love going there and seeing all the stuff about him and his queens and his children and all that. So I just kept that in the back of my mind while I was reading this. It was easier to like visualize characters and stuff, because I feel like with historical fiction books, it's really easy to get caught up in like, who's that? Wait, who's that? Who's that? And it's hard to like visualize them. So that really helped for me too. As I mentioned earlier, I did listen to the audiobook for this, and I'm really glad I didn't read it, because I think I would have just gotten really bored and then put it aside permanently. I honestly don't even know if I'm going to read My Plain Janes, because I've heard that one isn't even as good as My Lady Jane, so I don't know if I'm gonna like it at all. I did want to give it a chance though, because I have heard so many good things, and it, you know, it's like a really cool cover, and I've heard that it's really funny, which it was, but overall I just kind of felt like I was missing something. Going along with the audiobook too, I felt like there were times where I would zone out and then zone back in, and I felt like I hadn't missed anything at all, which was kind of a disappointment too, because obviously like you don't want that in a book. I think this book too is like 600 pages. No. This book is actually almost 500 pages. It says on Goodreads that it's 491, but I don't know, I just felt like it could have been half that length and still as funny and interesting as far as the characters were concerned. Don't get me wrong, I do see why people like this, and I will give it the credit that it deserves as far as like writing historical fiction is probably not very easy because you have to do tons of research, and I did think they did a really good job with making it sort of fun and like changing certain things obviously with like the magical aspect and everything. So I did like that, but at the end of the day, it just didn't hold my attention as much as I wanted it to, and funny dialogue will only get you so far as it goes for me as a reader. Anyway, that's my review of My Lady Jane. Again, like I said, I haven't done one of these reviews in a really long time. Like, I have notes actually right here in front of me that I had to write up before doing this video because I was so afraid I would just ramble and not make any sense, which I probably did anyway. But if you made it to the end, thank you for watching, and if you guys want to see more video reviews, definitely let me know because I've been reading a ton of stuff and I want to share my thoughts with you guys. You can find me down in the links below, and I will see you guys in the next video. Goodbye! Alright, take 2. This book is just actually bleh, but otherwise I just felt like there's a train.